All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the October 3rd, 2024 meeting of the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan Civic Advisory Committee, or CAC. My name is Ben Demers. I'm a senior planner in economic development for the city of Somerville. I use he, him. We are hosting this evening's meeting over Zoom. So one thing to note about this is that for virtual meetings under state guidance, we do not allow for what is called side conversation. And so this just means that the chat function amongst attendees has been disabled. So if anybody has a question or anything like that this evening, member of the public, if you have a question, then you can raise your hand and we can call on you at that time. I'm going to note also, because we have a lot of new members here this evening, so these meetings are generally recorded and then they're posted to the city website along with the summary afterwards. So we follow sort of the open meeting law standards for meetings for the Civic Advisory Committee. I'll note also that generally the way we do this is we use like a live note document. So that's why I have this slide show up, but that's also why it's not in presentation mode. I had kind of inherited this from my predecessor. I think it works pretty well for this. But also, if you're ever in future meetings feeling like it's a lot of looking at slides and we want to do more looking at each other's faces, just let me know. Happy to kind of adjust things. So running through our agenda for this evening, this is a little bit different from what I sent you initially. We generally will start these meetings with the approval of the previous meeting summary and a roll call vote. But because this is a new group or the first meeting for many people, I think we should start off by kind of welcoming new CAC members. We'll do introductions. I'm going to review different pieces of meeting structure. This is also going to be pulling on the CAC's charter that I had shared with people ahead of time. And then we'll also talk through and review some of the goals of the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan, which it is this CAC's goal to implement and to give feedback on. And then from there, we'll do an approval of previous meeting summary, just so people kind of see what that item usually looks like on these agendas. And then we will have a development update on the 299 Broadway project. And so we'll have a couple members of the development teams here with us this evening, it's mostly to say hello. Again, this is kind of new faces for a lot of people. So do a bit of an introduction to the team and to the project. We then like to leave time for neighborhood updates from different CAC members. And from there, we will leave time for a public comment period before we adjourn. Are there any questions up top? Cool. And I'm just gonna look through to see if anybody else has joined. Okay. Arthur, I see your hand.
Yeah, when you're saying neighborhood updates, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so that is generally a space if there's like anything that CAC members want to make other members aware of. So we'll talk a bit about this as we get into like the background on the CAC, but we will talk a bit about like the scope of this specific Civic Advisory Committee, which tends to be pretty focused on like the specific sites in the urban renewal plan, but also if there's anything happening around that you just think it would be good for, this as a community meeting space to mention, we can also give updates in that space. Cool. Okay, so shifting into our first agenda item, welcoming new CAC members. So obviously, as existing members know, we've been doing recruitment over the last probably 6 months at this point. And so glad to see that process has completed. We are welcoming, I believe, 7 or 8 new CAC members with us this evening. So really just wanted to start this off by doing a round of introductions. So I figured we could start off saying, your name, how you typically spend an afternoon in the neighborhood, and then also one thing you're hoping to talk about in this committee. And I think just to facilitate us seeing each other's faces, I'm going to stop sharing screen. And I can just put these 3 points in the chat. Cool. Is there anybody who would like to start us off? Yeah, Colby.
Hey everybody, I'm Colby. I live in the Winter Hill neighborhood. I guess like a typical afternoon when I'm not working would be taking a visit up to the Somerville Public Library branch, the main branch there, or going on a walk on the linear path extension. And yeah, this is my first meeting with the CAC Council, so really just kind of hoping to learn what a typical CAC meeting is like.
Thanks, welcome. Do we want to just popcorn it? So why don't we go to Councilor Klingon?
Hi, I'm Councilor Jesse Klingon. The Ward 4 City Councilor representing Winter Hill, Mystic area, Fellsway West, over to Gilman Square. I am happy to be here. I've been on this committee since its formation, and been happy with the results so far. We have been shepherding through the 299 project, and that is an exciting project that continues to move forward. And I'm sure we'll hear about that tonight. So happy to be here. Thanks.
Thanks, Councilor. Breck?
Sorry, I'm off video. I'm driving, so this feels like a safer safer route here. But Breck Bailey, I own Winter Hill Brewing at 328 Broadway, which is just across the street from 299 Broadway, the future site. I've been on this committee since I think we started it a couple years ago. So very excited to see it moving forward here, and we'll be excited to get an update tonight from the development team, as well as to meet all the new members on the committee.
Thank you, Breck. And I'll note that Councilor Jake Wilson is also serving on the CAC. And from the initial members from those few years ago, it's Councilor Klingon, Councilor Wilson, and Breck who are still with the committee. Everybody else with us this evening just joined from this most recent recruitment process. I'll pass things over to Denise.
Hi everyone, my name is Denise Flowers, pronounced she, her. Typically in the afternoon, what I do if I'm not working or home.
Oh,
Sorry,
Denise,
I think I was on mute. Yeah, I saw that. Sorry. If I'm not working or cooking dinner for my kids, I like to go across the street and take a walk by the river, the Mystic River. So, and I'm on the Winter Hill neighborhood as well.
nice, thank you. Welcome. Arthur?
Hi everyone, I'm Arthur Gonsalves. I usually in the afternoon, I think I'm just chilling at home, or if not, I would just walk my dog and that kind of stuff. Nothing too exciting. I'm really excited to learn more about this project and be a part of this committee.
Nice, thanks, Arthur. Ani?
Hi all. I'll dare to go on video. So I'm Ani, a Gemian. I live in Winter Hill with my family on Heath Street. I work in Back Bay, but when I'm home after work, we're usually going to the park or one of the many parks around us. We're in our backyard or hanging out with our neighborhood people. Our neighbors are pretty tight, which is fabulous. And I'm really excited to be a part of this group and to hear more about the project and just be engaged. I'm really excited about it. So looking forward to working with everyone.
Thank you. Renee?
Hi, my name is Renee LeWinter. I'm an artist and designer. I retired a few years ago, so I'm back in my studio, which is on the 3rd floor of my house. I'm on Sewell Street, so this project has been of great interest for the last 20 years of what's happened to the neighborhood, you know, with the closing of Star Market and the downgrading and all the machinations going on with the former owners. And I'm thrilled to bits that we've finally gotten rid of them. and that we can move forward now in, because the neighborhood, I moved here because I grew up in New York and in Brooklyn, and I liked coming to Somerville because it had, when I was looking around for a place to live, I could walk to the post office, the bank, the sub shop, and there's so much here that is small businesses that are vital, and it's neighborhood, and going to the Sunoco station today to get a repair on my car, so it's that kind of welcoming neighborhood. And having had the blight for these years, at the main focal point has been a thing that's of great concern. And also the spillage over into the Sewell Street lots, which have been, neglected during this whole time by the ownership. I mean, the fencing was put up originally 30 years ago and never painted, kept maintenance or anything. So it's been something everybody in the neighborhood has been looking forward to seeing fixed, and looking forward to having, the vibrancy brought back there on the street scene and everything else.
Definitely. Thank you, Renee. And then I think, Nick, you are last.
Awesome. Thanks, Ben. Hey, everybody. I'm Nick Techlitz. Recently moved to Winter Hill back in May. I'm right on Fenwick Street. One thing that with all the nice weather that we've had is I like to walk with my wife and my dog around the block and in the neighborhood. So Temple Street is sort of right on our route, so walk by this site pretty often. And I guess with this being my first meeting, just hoping to sort of learn and see the progress that's been made so far and see sort of what sort of is on deck for the future. So yeah, excited to be here. Thanks, Ben.
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Very glad to have you all with
Ben,
us.
I just want to say that I was switching between devices. I think I missed the instructions. So I heard everybody saying something about doing something in the afternoon, and I actually didn't hear any of that.
That is okay. Do you want to share what you do in the afternoon, Counselor?
On weekdays, I mean, I pretty much work every day and then have meetings after work. So I'm pretty much working most of the time.
Very fair. The life of a
In
counselor.
the afternoon, on the weekends, I like to walk my dog and take my dog to the dog park.
Nice. And I'll note also that Scott Lombardi from the Market Development team just joined us. So Scott, I'll pass things over to you a little bit later, but just wanted to note with him entering the chat. Cool. I am going to, hey Scott. So I'm going to shift to giving a bit of an overview of some key parts of the CAC's charter that I shared with you. And I'll note that, so this charter was drafted up when the group was first formed in 2022. So things can change. I just want to kind of make that clear. There's a lot of new members in this group. If there are things we want to change moving forward, we can do that. But this just lays out a lot of the norms and goals for this group in general, just to give you that context. So I'm going to re-share my screen. So yeah, want to pull out a couple of key points from the charter. So the first section of the charter, it overviews the purpose, the objective, and the scope for this group. So to reiterate the purpose, the goal of this group is really creating a forum in which neighborhood perspectives can be collected and shared, and to bring diverse voices to the developer selection and site redevelopment process to implement the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan. So just to reiterate, that is really kind of the purpose of this group overall. As we are implementing this Urban Renewal Plan, which I'll give a little more context on the history of it later, this is really kind of meant to be a space where people can be giving feedback, give some guidance to the city, and kind of have that regular touch point also with the development team to be hearing sort of what the next direction is in the process. The objective is that all perspectives shared with the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan Civic Advisory Committee are valued, that the group does not need to reach consensus on any particular topic. Rather, points of group consensus will be identified along with the range of dissenting perspectives so as to inform the discussions of the decision-making bodies listed above. And we note this because with many city boards or committees like this, there's often, you work towards consensus, or you might vote and a majority gets to kind of create the direction. With an advisory committee like this, really the goal is to gather as many perspectives as possible. And so, in the notes, or if we're ever kind of doing an official communication and there's potentially disagreement, we will note that in that official communication or in the notes. So disagreement is always welcome. Obviously respectful disagreement, but that's always something that we can note. And then I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the scope, so this group has a limited purview. The goal is really, as I said, to talk about implementation of the urban renewal plan. So it's the specific area that is captured by the urban renewal plan that we'll talk a bit about. And we'll refrain from direct involvement in additional processes. So, if there are other processes that are happening adjacent to the site, say they were doing another like streetscape redesign work on Broadway, then, that would be less the focus of this group. This wouldn't be a space where we're like deliberating a lot about that. It might be a space where we're sharing information about a meeting about that, just because we know it might be of interest, but that's less the focus of this particular group. That does not stop anyone on this committee from engaging in those other spaces, but just to say kind of the main way that we'll use this space. Cool. So reviewing also the composition of the Civic Advisory Committee. So as members know from going through the appointment process, members are associated with a different seat that has been, there were sort of a set number of seats and specific groups that those seats should represent that were determined when the charter was first put together. So we have a business owner, we have several different resident positions. So we have a general open position, a renter position, a position from Mystic River and Mystic View complexes, a 65 plus position, a youth position. And then we also have these language liaison, or it's kind of community liaison to non-English speaking communities. And so we have a Spanish language liaison, a Portuguese language liaison, and there is a set seat also for a Haitian Creole language liaison, although that seat is not currently filled. I do want to make a note about that the goal of these language liaison pieces, it's not to necessarily provide direct translation during these meetings. Just want to make that clear. The city has the Summer Viva Office of Immigrant Affairs that we can always pull in if direct translation is of interest. But this is really to kind of make sure that we have sort of a touch point with different communities and that you're able to sort of represent perspectives and things you're hearing from those communities in these groups. So I'll note also that we have a couple positions that are still vacant. So we have an institutional partner position that is vacant, a workforce position that is vacant, and then as I mentioned, there's the language liaison for the Haitian Creole community. Okay, so getting into some of the member roles and responsibilities. So I'm just going to kind of read through these. Members are responsible for helping gather perspectives from their personal networks and the broader public, and then keeping those same networks and the community informed to the best of their ability about the deliberations of the CAC. So again, the goal is really expressing the range of views. So it might be your own view, but I also really want to encourage you to share, different things that you are hearing from your community about this project. So if there's ever, a concern about how something is being implemented, really want to have that shared in this space. Also, if you think, if you're hearing that somebody would want to engage in this, keep in mind this is also a public meeting, so people are always welcome to come to these meetings themselves and also share those perspectives directly. And then members are also expected to help design, promote, facilitate, and synthesize input from public meetings. We have not hosted a public meeting on the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan implementation process in a bit, mostly because a lot of it is being covered currently by one specific development project at the Star Market and Walgreens sites. But if in the future we want to do any engagement, really looking to this group to sort of figure out how we want to do that engagement. Where do we want to go? Do we want to use different methods of reaching people? Continuing on with the roles. So members are expected to attend all meetings, which will be scheduled in advance. So if you're not able to make it, obviously things come up, that is totally fine. Just ask that you let me know. And then the last piece on this is just that members must be willing to be constructive, strive throughout the process to bridge gaps in understanding, seek options that meet multiple interests, and commit to the principles of respect, decency, and civility. We have never had a problem with that from my understanding in the CAC. Hopefully Councilor Klingon, you can attest to that. But, just kind of keeping to these goals of respect, decency, civility. We might all have different perspectives on how you want to see, development in this area or see this community grow. They're just trying to see the perspectives of other members. Oh, and then actually the one last thing on member roles and responsibilities. So the charter does kind of outline some rules for discussion. And so, these are pretty straightforward. I don't need to read through all of them here, but just things as simple as, only one person speaking at a time, refrain from speaking on behalf of a group necessarily. It's kind of more representing, things you're hearing. But then also aiming, we often have a lot to get through in these meetings, so aiming to be concise, succinct, things like that. I want to also outline the roles of city staff. So as sort of the liaison for this committee, I generally will be facilitating meetings. And so, this mentions here, staff might use any number of techniques to help ensure that everyone has the opportunity to speak. Comments are kept to a reasonable length of time and discussion topics are provided sufficient time and focus. So generally we'll try to kind of shape the time given for different points of the conversation. I also will always send out a meeting agenda ahead of time. So you'll generally the week before a meeting see an email from me confirming that the time works for people. And then the week of a meeting or the week before, I will send out an agenda of the different things that we will discuss. And then if you want to add anything to that agenda, you're always welcome to write back and say, can we add something about this? And then from there, I will also provide meeting summaries, which I will draft after the meeting, and then I will share with the agenda at the next meeting, which both helps you remember what we talked about, but we'll also ask in that meeting that you will vote on those summaries, and then I can post them sort of the way meeting minutes would be posted for a board or commission for the city. Also my responsibility to provide technical information and substantive expertise. So if there are moments where, we need to have an understanding of urban renewal or of real estate markets or of any particular part of real estate development. So, if as the civic spaces for this project are being built out, you have specific questions, I can answer what I can answer. And when I can't answer it, I can look to other staff to come and join these sessions and kind of provide more of that expertise. And then as it says here, materials will be posted on the project website on Summer Voice. In general, I want you to think of me as, I am here to, if you have any questions about the project in general, I'm always happy to talk about it, always happy to answer them, but also want to make sure that I'm facilitating kind of a group experience that feels engaging, where you can add to the conversation. Okay, and then regarding group meetings, so meetings are generally held monthly or less frequently as needed, and they're expected to be about 1 to 2 hours in length. So usually scheduled from 5:30 to 7, although again, as I mentioned, we can always look forward to adjust. We can look to adjust this a bit if it works better for people's schedules. These meetings are generally hosted on the second Thursday of the month. So the notice or the advice that I give is to kind of just block off that day. And then, as I said, I will message the week before, just kind of noting if we have enough to talk about in that meeting. Meetings are going to be open to the public and posted in advance, as I mentioned. And then generally these meetings will be hosted in English, but we always can provide multilingual interpretation if it's requested ahead of time. And if we ever are doing sort of larger community meetings or outreach, then that outreach will also be done in Haitian Creole, Portuguese, and Spanish. Okay. And then this is the last piece on sort of this structure. So just to note also that occasionally I will send some things between meetings, but deliberation should always really be happening in this public space. That is the goal of having this as a public meeting. And as I already mentioned at the beginning, these will be recorded and occasionally we will host in-person sessions where we want to go to the site. And if we do that, then we'll just save some time at the next meeting to make sure we're talking about, any questions or what we learned at that session together in that sort of public forum. So that was a lot of information. So we want to check in. How does that sound to everyone? Are there any kind of initial questions on that structure? Are people comfortable with that current structure? I know that that's also a lot of information, but you'll kind of learn it as we go. And then also want to make sure, generally, I believe this time works for most people, but if you ever want to reach out, if it's not working, just send me a message and we can survey the group to see if there's another time that works better.
Hey, Ben, thank you for that. Just a quick kind of 30,000-foot question.
Yeah.
So every meeting is open to the public and is advertised and posted for people, so they know when it's happening. Is the idea that, like, in terms of our roles, are we supposed to be coming to these meetings with, additional information that we're hearing from people to help facilitate those conversations and questions, or like, how do we fit into the overall input process with the public?
Yeah, I think that the goal, I will say a lot of the meetings, it's often like giving updates on how the project is developing. And so it's partially to be taking that information and then sort of disseminating it back out. But also, yes, the goal is for you to be bringing both your own perspective, but then also the perspectives that you're hearing in the Winter Hill community, and having it in response to the different agenda items that we have in any meeting.
Got it. Okay. Great.
Are there any other questions? I know sometimes it's tough to go through a lot of these administrative things at the beginning, especially in a Zoom setting. But I'm just going to reiterate again, this process can be what people want it to be. So if you do have feedback about how you'd like to see it structured, please feel welcome to share that, and we can integrate that into the meetings. Okay, with that, I'm going to shift into doing a bit of an overview on the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan itself, before I hand things over to Scott to kind of talk specific pieces of the project. Okay, let me reshare my screen. Okay, so the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan. I know I shared this in the email ahead of time. If you haven't had a chance yet to just kind of read over the executive summary, I think it's helpful context to kind of understand the purviews of the work that this group does. So rewinding a bit, 2016 saw the adoption of the Winter Hill neighborhood plan. And so not quite at the level of the urban renewal plan yet. So this is kind of more envisioning a future direction for development and just kind of other things within the neighborhood. And parts of this plan really saw renewed commercial corridor along Broadway, more affordable housing, additional green space. It outlines a lot of different goals, as most kind of neighborhood plans do. They touch on a lot of things. The site in particular at the abandoned Star Market and sort of some of the surrounding sites had been of interest for a long time. The owner had refused to sell this site, and so as Renee was referencing, it had sort of sat blighted in the middle of this neighborhood for 15 years. And so there was a lot of interest in that particular site and some of the surrounding sites. So there were a couple of lots on Sewell Street that people were interested in, the private right-of-way, Sewell Court, and as well as the buildings that are at the intersection of Temple and Broadway. So as you can see, those were those are included in the urban renewal plan area. And so this pink outline here is sort of the project outline. So this is everything that is included in the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan. So engagement for this plan was done between 2019 and 2020, and then the plan itself was passed in 2021. Generally, the processes for these plans are, staff will do research to kind of show that these sites meet the requirement for urban renewal. So they have to show that they're blighted or decadent, which is really just saying that they're kind of like not being used for their full economic value. And it sets out a 10-year time frame from when it was passed to see implementation. And so some of the main areas that it encompasses, as I mentioned, 299 Broadway. So that's the former Star Market site, as well as the Walgreens building. It also includes 313 Broadway. And so this is the building at the corner of Temple and Broadway with Winter Hill Liquors, as well as the Brazilian Times on the second floor. And then also 9 Temple Street, which is the barber shop, and there's some residences above it. So that is everything that's included in that area. What is unique about this is that often the process for urban renewal, just to give some of this context, once a plan, so like once the area for the urban renewal plan has been outlined, the process that the redevelopment authority might use, and I'll note also the redevelopment authority, or the SRA, this is an authority within the city of Somerville that is tasked with overseeing the implementation of urban renewal. So, you know, a lot of the feedback from this group in particular kind of goes towards guiding the work of the SRA. The process that is generally used is that once an area is outlined, the SRA might go through a process to select a development partner. And from there, they might use the power of eminent domain if necessary, which allows them to buy parcels and then kind of compile those parcels and then work with their redevelopment partner to achieve the goals that were outlined by the neighborhood. What is unique in this case is that the area was outlined, but then there's actually a private development deal that went forward that is seen as meeting a lot of the goals that are outlined in the urban renewal plan. And hi, Darcy, I saw that you just joined as well. Just getting a bit of an outline on the plan at the moment. So while often there is a development partner selected through sort of that classic process of the SRA, this is a little bit different. So in this case, a development partnership between Mark Development, Beacon Communities, and Rise Together kind of put forward a proposal for a project on the site that was seen as meeting a lot of the neighborhood's goals that were outlined in the plan. And then they were able to ultimately purchase the site from the existing owner who had been unwilling to sell for such a long period of time. So I'm not going to go too into detail because I'm going to pass things over to Scott and Darcy to talk more about this in a minute. But you know, this project consists of over 300 units of housing, many of which are deed restricted affordable, which was a super high priority for a lot of people in the neighborhood. It also creates 2 new civic spaces, as well as ground floor retail and a community space. So a lot of the work that we end up doing, or a lot of the updates that we end up doing in this space, are hearing updates on 299 Broadway specifically. So you'll find that that's going to take a lot of the conversation within these meetings. But I will note that, you know, at some point we might also return to talk more about the buildings at the corner of Temple and Broadway. So, you know, CAC members have, I don't know if been split is the correct phrase, but, you know, at the moment, a lot of the goals are being met without needing to move forward with any redevelopment on those parcels. But that might be something that CAC members want to discuss more in the future. So just to give a sense of what we're going to often be talking a lot about. And I'll note also that one of the main outcomes of the initial round of engagement from the Civic Advisory Committee was that in late 2022, this group had put together a letter in support of the 299 Broadway project. And they had that letter when they went for their initial approval with the Zoning Board of Appeals, who issues the comprehensive permit in this case. And so, you know, after the project had received that letter of support and gotten its project approvals, this group sort of went on hiatus for a while and then started meeting again towards the end of last year as the project team was able to purchase the site. So before I hand things over to Scott and Darcy, though, I do want to just kind of like leave some open time for questions. So I'm going to try to stop sharing. Sorry, my computer's being a little bit slow today. And it's also getting very loud in my office. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Yeah, I just want to check in. Are there any kind of like, I'm sure people have many questions, you know, it's a lot to take in at once, but curious if there are any kind of high level questions that people want to talk a bit about now. Truly no worries if not. As questions come up though, I just want to make sure people generally feel comfortable with like the technical backing of some of this stuff. So always feel welcome to reach out, or we can spend some time later in this meeting as you're sort of mulling over some of the stuff we talked about. And can answer anything that you're thinking about. With that, I'm going to pass things over to Scott and Darcy. We're going to give a bit more of an overview of the 299 Broadway development, and just kind of tell you sort of where they are in the process right now. So I'll pass this over to.
All right, thanks, Ben. It's good to meet the new people on the line tonight. Scott Lombardi, Vice President of Development with Mark Development. We're partnered with Beacon Communities on this project. I'll introduce Darcy will introduce herself in a minute, but I've been involved in this project for 18 to 24 months now. Been with Mark Development for close to 8 years, but we're excited to be part of this, the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan. And I'd say that we have wholeheartedly embraced this process as a partnership with this group and with the city. The neighborhood and the councilors, really all the stakeholders on the city side, we've really embraced their feedback and tried to incorporate into what we came up with and ultimately got approved. So that spirit is going to continue forward here as we get closer to finishing off our design and then hopefully starting construction mid next year. So Darcy, you want to introduce yourself and I can jump back into a high level overview?
Yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Scott and Ben. I'm Darcy Jameson. Really nice to meet everyone. I'm Vice President of Development with Beacon Communities. For those of you who don't know Beacon, we're a Boston-based affordable housing developer, owner, and operator. We have about 20,000 apartments in about 13 states, 150 communities, the majority of which are affordable. We're completely mission-driven affordable housing and sort of bringing the affordable, much of the affordable component to this project. Super excited to be working in Somerville. I've been at Beacon for a little over 20 years and done a lot of sort of larger scale affordable housing redevelopment projects, including, many of you may know, Old Colony, where Whitey Bulger did all of his drug dealing and nonsense down in South Boston. So if you've driven through there over the last decade or so, you've seen many of those buildings coming down systematically and new LEED Platinum and now Passive House buildings going up there. So really excited to bring that experience to Somerville. I'll stop there and give it back to Scott.
Yeah, so I'm happy to give as much or as little detail as you want. I really don't know how much people on the line know about the project specifics. Tell you that it's 316 units currently, 115 in the Beacon building, which is building A, which is at the corner behind the liquor store at the corner of Temple and Broadway. Mark Development's the owner of building B. We have 201 units in our building. They are both going to be Passive House certified, where we really leaned into the sustainability best practices on this one, and it's driven a lot of our design decisions. We've working with UTIL as the architecture firm. I think if any of you guys have been to any of the community meetings or ZBA meetings throughout the last couple of years, you've probably seen Tim and Mimi Love from UTIL, who we think came up with great designs for both buildings that tie together but look separate and look like they've been developed over time incrementally. Big part of the design offering is also at the ground level and the public spaces that we're going to keep available to the community and to the public. There's Sewell Park on the north side of our site, and what we're currently calling the Civic or Broadway Plaza at the Broadway side, and the pedestrian muse that connects the two. So you probably saw in the visual that Ben shared earlier, you can access our site from Broadway. You have a nice public space that's amenitized with retail around it. It should be an active, fun space that connects all the way through to the back to Sewell Street and Sewell Park. So those will hopefully be lively places that people in the neighborhood and around the city like to come to as they visit the retail. And you can see all the green on here, but our green scores, we exceeded them with flying colors. We want this to be a place that's comfortable, and you can go there and read a book, or you can go there and go to a restaurant or hang out, whatever you want to do. We have some child play spaces in Sewell Park. So we're trying to offer something for everyone back there, families, kids, adults. We also, Ben, if you want to point to the community, the Winter Hill community room on that space, we do have 3,000-ish square feet of community space that will be run by the city, run and programmed by the city. It's currently thought of as being an early childhood space. It's double height space. It will be similar looking to the retail, but it will be primarily used by, or strictly used by the city, I should say. What else, Ben? Are there other things just from a design perspective before I give an update on where we're at in the process that you think would be helpful to this group? Again, I don't know how much people know about the project, how closely they've followed along, or how little.
I'll add one thing. I know a lot of times when new large developments like this are going in and green space, public spaces, people wonder sort of about management and safety and security. Beacon Residential Management and Mark Development, in their experience, we have long track records in property management. We build our communities with an eye to, visibility of eyes on sites, security cameras, oftentimes security that patrols the area as well. So the buildings and the open spaces will be professionally managed and maintained and secure as part of being sort of good neighbors in the community and for the residents that move in.
Hey, this is Ani. I might be getting ahead of myself with the question. This might be coming down the line, but I'm curious. I know there's conversation here and there popping in about the Winter Hill Liquors parcel, the two other parcels in the urban renewal plan that Ben mentioned in the beginning. And is the city taking a position now? Or maybe it's not evolved yet or there yet, but has the city kind of taken a position on whether those parcels will be included by eminent domain? I mean, my thought being, the timing involved, the process itself would require an additional period of time, potentially amending plans and so on and so forth. So I'm just curious, big picture, what the perspective is on those parcels, realistically speaking.
Yeah, so I'm not sure there's exactly like an official position. In terms of the 299 Broadway development specifically, they were able to work it out such that they didn't need to try to purchase that specific site. They're able to construct the buildings without those sites at the corner. So I think because of the main focus on that and how much of the urban renewal plan area that covers, there was a bit of a pause on continuing conversations about that intersection at Temple and Broadway. I was not here for a lot of those conversations. Like a bit of that precedes my time. So for the context on that, I can talk more with my predecessor to understand a little bit more where that conversation ended up. So I think the idea is that we will come back to that conversation, or that conversation can be something we come back to more in the future, with the understanding that a lot of the focus is on the 299 Broadway site at the moment.
Got it. No, that makes sense. So let's the project move forward as is, right? Without having to consider the placement of those two parcels. Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah. Colby?
Yeah, this may be out of the scope of what you all are able to answer, Darcy and Scott, but I'm curious if there's like any changes to the traffic pattern that we should be aware of on either Broadway or Temple, both during the construction but also post-construction.
Darcy, you want me to take that one?
Please.
All right, so I'll say during construction, we're going to have to take the sidewalks, right? So there'll be some diversion of pedestrian foot traffic around the site into where the road is today. We've fully developed a fully engineered construction management plan that we're about to finalize once our contractor is fully on board here. But the goal is to not to keep traffic as not disrupted as possible. We don't have to take any full lanes. We keep the bus station in front of our site roughly where it is today. There are no roads that are closed altogether. So, from a real high level, traffic patterns aren't changed, no, but things will be shifting, if that makes sense. A lane might get smaller than it is today, and a curb cut on Broadway or on Temple might slightly move from where it is today, but pedestrian traffic and vehicular traffic will keep going down the same roads it goes today in the same directions and same patterns. I'll say in the fully built condition, this is a car-free development. So we picture this as two buildings that are commuter populations, right? The big draw here is the Green Line extension, that it's close to Cambridge, close to Boston, close to Arsenal Yards. It's close to places where a lot of our tenants will likely work. Because of that, they're not coming with cars. So the trip generation numbers for our project are really low, a lot lower than what you're typically seeing on multifamily projects of this size. So yeah, I don't think it will be super impactful. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me right now, but if you were to compare it to a different another 315 or 316 unit project in the city that has one car or 0.75 cars per unit, it'll be a lot less traffic generated than that comparable project.
And certainly much less than when it was a Star Market and a Walgreens.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Nick.
Living on Sewell Street,
Oh.
and I know this is talking with some neighbors. The general overall concern is during the construction process, the neighbors are wanting to know what mitigation will take place for alleviating potential asbestos or dust or other kinds of particulates. Because the ones that I'm not on the even side of the street, but the even side of the street backs up onto the lot. And given the wind patterns coming through, it does blow across, because every couple of months I have to wash the front of my front door wall because of the particulates, the dark black particulates that capture there. So that's something I think in terms of overall informational process and communication to the abutting neighbors, and here and on the also by up by Jake's as well, that people would want that, those are going to be concerns, as soon as you're going to say you're doing construction, and the word has to get out before, I believe, then after people start, raising their hands going, what's this going on here? And they start getting real upset. So I think that's a communication issue, I think is very important to have, because there's not a lot of free space between the project. There
I'll jump in and then
people's
Scott,
windows on there for their apartments and stuff.
feel free. Renee, great question and point. Before we get started, we will make sure that we have touched base with the community and folks know kind of what's getting started, when, how to reach us if they need to. So we're, as Scott said, probably not closing until late spring, early summer. So we've got a little bit of time. But as we start to approach knowing that we've got a real start date, we'll start to be in touch with folks so that they know who we are and we're getting started.
Yeah, and it needs to be bilingual, because the street is bilingual. We have, multicultural, this has always been a multicultural street.
Renee, what languages?
Portuguese, Spanish, Haitian, some.
Yeah, so in general, and we talked quick about this earlier, Darcy, but in
Yeah,
general,
this
when like,
is, and it also goes up to Grant Street, because it backs up over on Grant Street there, especially that part of the parcel that's the little strip that's behind the dental office.
Yep.
But, so it's, calling an actual community meeting and explaining and having translation people there, inviting people to attend, but if they can't attend, then making sure that the mailboxes, they've gotten something in writing that they can read, and numbers where they can call if they have any questions.
Yeah, those are all good points. I mean, very fair points on the big construction projects about to start. I'd say that you guys will probably find that if anything, Darcy and I both tend to over communicate. So we're not going to be strangers for this group, and I'd be happy to involve as many people in the community as we need to. I make my cell phone available to everyone. I think Darcy would probably make the same offer, but we'll always be available. And I agree that it's just all about communication, right? Like construction is loud. It can be dirty, at least on the site. There are ways to mitigate noise, dust, everything, but communication is key, and letting you guys know ahead of time when things are going to happen versus reacting when there's a problem is critical. So fully hear your concerns.
The wall that is at the back end of the Sewell Street lots and it runs past the condominiums buildings there in the homes. People are gonna wanna know what's gonna happen to that wall and as part of this. Because right now we've got weed trees coming out of it and they've cut them down and they've always come back. What's the structural integrity? You know, anything relating to that, so they don't have to fear that something's gonna collapse into their property.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
You know, so these are the kinds of things that people have been talking about on the street and concerned about that. Because
Yeah, I think before construction, we probably have a meeting specifically about that. You know, what our plan is with the new retaining walls. I could tell you just generally, we're not relying on reusing any of the existing retaining walls. We're planning on keeping them in place, but putting new, big, structurally sound, you know, engineered stamped walls on our side of them to hold them up. So we're trying as much as we can. I think we've succeeded with our design to not touch any neighboring properties, but to keep all the work within our property and not assume that anything is structurally sound for reuse.
yeah, I wouldn't think it would be, because those trees have been there for at least, I've been on this property for over 50 years. And those trees have been sticking out of that wall there for 50 years. And their roots system is elaborate in that wall there. So
Oh yeah, I know it well.
once you get going, you know, you're gonna discover that they're stubborn, they keep coming back.
Mm-hmm. Well, where a majority of those retaining walls are behind the property, the condominium property you mentioned. I think it's 25 to 27 Temple.
Mhm.
Those precast large concrete retaining walls, those all get removed and don't get replaced with anything. That's going to be, you know, graded out so you can walk from the front of the site to the back. So, you know, where you have several hundred feet of retaining wall now, that number will be cut in half, maybe more, with the new retaining walls that are going in to replace them. So in a lot of cases, there's going to be no need for retaining walls. It's just going to be one big graded site that you can walk right across.
I think it'd be good if you have design drawings that show that, which
Mhm.
you don't see on the internet now. For those kinds of things to inform that whole street
Yeah,
that this
these
is
are
what's gonna be happening.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
we'll work with Ben when we get that community meeting scheduled.
Yeah. So Renee, we are actually planning to submit for our first building permit for the site work and one of the buildings prior to the end of this year. So we're only a few months away from having the complete set of plans ready for publication to everyone. And that the retaining walls are a big part of it, especially the
Yeah,
site package.
one of the things too, don't assume that some of the people on the street, because some of them are older, have internet access.
Okay. So in-person meetings preferred once we get to the community
Yeah,
level?
you gotta give them a chance to have in-person or have specific mailings to them to do that.
All right. Ben, question for you as I'm thinking about this. Does the city have translator resources available or that you could refer to us for these meetings just to make sure we come prepared when the time comes?
Yeah, so generally for public meetings when the city is hosting them, so we were talking a bit about this earlier, we will host those meetings in English, Spanish, Portuguese, and Haitian Creole. So we'll have like live interpretation. So yeah, those are the languages we generally use here. If it's like a meeting being hosted with the city, those are resources we can make available, but we can talk more about that.
Okay, thanks.
And since it is easier sometimes for some people to be, virtual versus in person, I don't know, Ben, if you guys have done any hybrid meetings where if people want to come and be in person that they can be, and
Yeah,
those of us
most
who be
most cases
virtual.
that's a good strategy I've seen.
Okay, we'll figure it out as it gets closer and make it work for everyone.
Yeah. But I'm just looking here at knowing what people are worrying about.
Yep.
We've been talking around on the street, and these would be, issues, that getting out front ahead of it before it becomes misunderstandings. We've got too much of that already out there in the world.
I appreciate that, Renee. Nick, you had your hand up also.
Yeah, just one thing, I guess I had two questions. Scott, you had mentioned that it was sort of like a car-free development. Does that mean there's no on-site parking at the new development? Okay.
That's
Got
right.
it.
Yeah.
And
There
then-
are 6 or 7 parking spaces behind where the liquor store is today, but they will be used for the retail at that corner. So residents have no access to on-site parking.
Okay. And then I'm sure it's obviously we haven't even broken ground, so it's very early in the process, but had you given any consideration in sort of your initial plans as to the types of retail that might sort of go into the development once the square footage becomes available? Do you have a sort of a concept of what you were thinking for that?
Yeah, we put a lot of thought into it. I mean, we want that space to be active. They're all right now, they all have the potential to be restaurant spaces, but they will be smaller footprint, sub 3,000, 2,500 square feet with the ability to move some demising walls, but smaller, hopefully local establishments. The way it's been described to me is like someone from Bow Market graduates to this space and then they have their, their new exciting space at the development. But yeah, it'll be nothing big. We haven't really gotten any more specific than that yet, but we'd like local restaurant operators or retailers or somebody that could activate the space around that courtyard that's going to have a lot of eyes on it and a lot of people passing through it.
Awesome. Thank you.
Arthur.
Hi, I wanted to clarify, is all the deed restricted housing in one of the buildings? Or are they split?
It's split. So there's 115 in Beacon's building and there are 20 in the Mark Development building. So it's split amongst both. And the a portion of the amenity spaces are commingled. So tenants from one building can use the amenity spaces in the other. So it operates as one big campus. And obviously all of the exterior amenities are available to everyone.
I also wanted to ask because I saw the plan had 2 lots on Sewell, and on the little design you showed us, there wasn't anything on that second lower lot.
It's a good catch. Yeah, that second lower lot is actually a lot that we offered to deed to the city. So as part of the process, we're going to deed that lot directly to the city and we'll likely even just go straight to the housing trust.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Absolutely.
Denise.
Yeah, so I have a question regarding the restrict affordable housing. So those units are gonna be most focused on families, like 2-3 bedroom units, or more 1 bedroom or studio?
Yeah, it's a mix of 1 to 3 bedroom apartments.
So, and do you know already, or you guys don't have an idea yet, how many 2-3 bedroom apartments will be available?
I do. If you just give me a minute, I will tell you. But you can
Okay.
keep talking.
Yeah, and
Okay.
also the other question, who decides the AMI? Is the city or is the city with the developers?
Ben, do you want to talk about that, or you want us to?
I think Gail probably know the process a bit better than me. Parts of our housing team would know, but I'm not super familiar with the process.
Yeah, absolutely. So this will be a project that's funded by the state under the federal low-income housing tax credit program, which means all apartments are set aside for households earning up to 60% of the area median income, which is set by the federal government for the Boston area, San Francisco, Chicago, et cetera. So it's specific to the Somerville area. And then rent is set so as not to exceed what would be 30% of that household's income. I mean, that's the broad-based answer to the question.
Okay.
Okay. It's always hard to keep that one simple.
No, I understand. Yeah, it's just, I feel like when we talk about affordable housing, and then we see that 80% the AMI, that's not affordable for many folks here in the city. So it's good to know there'll be 30%.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
then
and about if you can give me, if you don't have the numbers out, that's fine. How many 2-3 bedroom units?
no, I do. Let's see. I have to add them up. 29, 30, about 31 bedrooms, roughly 50 2 bedrooms and about 18, a little more than 18 3 bedrooms. There's a few
Sorry,
more.
31 for 1 bedroom, you say?
Yes. So hold on, give me a second. Let me just total them up. They're not
Yeah.
totaled.
Thank you.
That's okay. Um, keep chatting. I'll total them up.
I did just want to note, and so just to like make sure we're clear on this for the project overall, from my understanding, and Scott, please correct me, the like deed restricted units in the Mark Development Building, so like the mixed income building, the 20 affordable units there are at 80% AMI, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah, so it's a mix of different levels, and so in building A, that building is up to 60%, but in building B, so the mixed income building, that's going to have 20 units set at 80%.
Denise, there you go. 33 one. I threw it in the chat. 33 1 bedrooms, 62s, and 22 3s.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Darcy. Okay, I see that we also have a member of the public with a question who is actually from a sister civic advisory committee in Gilman Square. So Ben, I know you've had your hand up for a while, hopefully still there. I'm gonna call on you. Wait, sorry, clicked the...
Hello.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ben Algart, him. I had a couple questions as well around the two things. One around parking and the other about the community room. Around the community room, I had heard that, it was a community room for access by the community. Scott, when you were talking about it, you said it was being programmed by the city. Ben, you might know more about this too, but I was just wondering, my understanding was that the intention was that people in the community could make use of the room for, I don't know, a art display or a meeting in person for a community group. Is that currently how it's being planned? Or I think, Scott, you also mentioned like something more regular and exclusive. I was just wondering how that was going to play out.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, for the question. That stood out to me also. We don't have an exact process yet, so I know the intention will also be that if somebody wants to book it for, you know, like if a community organization wants to book it for hosting a meeting, that would still be possible. We just like don't have enough detail about what the process is going to be yet to speak to it. That's part of what we're going to be working out as the development is built. So like A, I don't have an exact answer on it, but B, it's kind of helpful to hear how people do want to be using it, because yes, the intention is definitely to make it so that the community does have as easy of access to the space as possible.
Excellent. And thanks. That's exactly the kind of answer that I was looking for. So that's great. The other thing about parking, I know in the past parking has proved to be a bit contentious about like both adding more cars to the road, but then also would people in the development being able to get parking passes? And this is really, I think, a question for Ben, but around this project. At one point, they were going to restrict people living in the property to not have access to getting passes, or then it was going to be only people who were paying market rate were not going to have access to passes. I was wondering where that's at today. I don't know that it ever took hold in that part of the city planning, but I was just wondering what we should expect.
Ben, if you want, I can take that one, or you can weigh in. All right, so we do have to provide all of the affordable renters the ability to apply for on-street parking passes. As for the market rate renters, we've limited to only allowing up to 50% of the market rate renters to be allowed to apply for city parking permits. The renters who do apply for those, the market rate renters who decide that they want to pursue that, they would have to pay us as the manager of the building into a fund that gets used for future mitigation dollars for the city and for managing the transportation impacts on the community. So yeah, they're disincentivized, at least the market rate renters, to apply for them, but it's capped at 50% of the market rate units. So 50% of the 180 market rate units on the project.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Cool.
And just by nature, I mean, we did a lot of market research before getting ourselves comfortable with the fact that, you know, this could truly be a commuter development that's quote unquote car free. We just feel like it's good. The way we've set this up, it's going to likely draw from a pool of tenants or people that want to live in a place that is bike friendly, bike oriented, has a huge bike room, bike repair stations, you know, easy access to everything that a true commuter could would want, right, without a car. So I just hopefully in practice it pans out that way, but we did a lot of research to help prove that thesis.
Yeah, and I'm on record because this is a meeting on record. But I always thought it was a bit unfriendly for welcoming people into the community and saying that they were not entitled to the same rights as others in the community. So I always felt that, you know, everyone should be able to bring their car, and that the whole community would have to juggle it. That alone should de-incentivize using cars. We have a great, robust network for bicycles, only getting better. We also have some of the best public transportation in Boston, which on any given day is somewhere between okay and good. So I always, again, I thought the community should be able to absorb new members and integrate them, and so I never liked that, but it sounds like you have worked out a plan, and that's good to hear.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Ben. Are there any other? This is great. People are starting to ask questions. This is, why we do these. So that's super helpful. Are there any other questions before I pass things back to Scott and Darcy, just to give kind of like a final sense of where they are, and then we can kind of shift to the final parts of the meeting. Arthur.
I know you said we would discuss it at another time, but it's like kind of still confusing me to this point. Like what would the other lots where the liquor store and stuff is, like what would the purpose be of integrating it into the development?
Yeah, so the goal with integrating it into the development would just be if there are like specific, if the community in general articulated wanting to see something that was outlined in the urban renewal plan at that site, then the SRA could consider, looking to select a development partner for that specific area. But again, from my understanding, and I apologize that I wasn't a part of the earlier process to speak super intimately with it, but from my understanding, part of what was beneficial about the 299 Broadway project as it was presented is that it was able to work around that area. And so, I think a lot of people in the community have also expressed wanting those spaces to stay. Obviously, the businesses and the nonprofits that are located there to stay. So I'm not trying to articulate that, there's a current goal of removing them. It's just that they still exist within the urban renewal plan. And so if there was a push to see something else there, either articulated, in this space through other community meeting space, then that is something that would still be still a pathway that could be pursued in the urban renewal plan.
But at that point it would just be a separate project then.
It would be separate from 299 Broadway. That is true, but the purview of this group in general is for the whole urban renewal area. So, which is mostly taken up by 299 Broadway, but those sites also are a part of that project area. But yes, it would be a separate project from this current development.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. And also, we can definitely spend more time talking about those sites. And after this meeting, I'll go back and talk with my director who did a lot of that engagement at the time to really understand what the ins and outs of that conversation around the corner lots were. Nick.
Yeah, so I just had one super quick follow-up question on the parking. I was just hoping to understand what the main motivations for not having the on-site parking were as part of this development.
Sure, I can answer that one. So when we were first considering buying this land, we did some, the original plan actually did have underground parking. We did some testing on the soils and found that the deeper down you went and the farther or the more excavation you were doing, the more environmentally unfriendly the soils were. So it would have killed the deal if we had to excavate, underneath both of those buildings to provide on-site underground parking. So we decided to pivot, and that's where we ended up, where we are now.
Got it. Thank you.
Renee,
Um,
sorry, Darcy.
no, go ahead. I was just-
Just one thing, because of following up about site maintenance coming through the winter months.
Mhm.
The sidewalks on Temple and Broadway are major thoroughfare passes. And could you make sure that the snow removal is done there? Because in the past, it's been problematic with the previous owner, and we would end up having people walking in the street in the bike lanes because it's too icy behind the old Walgreens. And also on patches on Broadway with the bus stop being there. So if you could make sure that that's part of your overall site maintenance plan until the construction starts.
Our management company are New Englanders. They know
Okay.
snow and ice.
Okay, yeah, it's been problematic there. They've never been a good neighbor.
But yeah, thank you for flagging that, Renee.
Yeah, thank you.
So Scott and Darcy, do you want to just kind of give a sense of where you're at? I appreciate all the time you've given this evening. But yeah, just to give kind of a final general sense.
Yeah, sure. Be happy to. So we've been advancing our design for the last year plus now since our permit approval. We have a called a 95% set of construction documents for building A and for the site. For building B, we're at about 100% DD, which is call it 75% construction documents, all gearing up for a year-end building permit submission, at least the first building permit submission of a couple, with an eye towards closing spring of 25. So seems like a long way away, but in mine and Darcy's world, this is the home stretch and it's getting close to being real. All that being said, I expect that we'll break ground probably late spring, early summer of 25, if everything goes as we've been planning. And 20 to 26 months later, we're going to have a fully completed development with people living in it and hopefully some nice fun retailers renting the retail spaces.
Great, thank you. Darcy, anything you want to add?
No, we're really excited to be on this kind of, as Scott said, home stretch.
Nice. All right, well, thank you both for taking the time this evening.
Meeting everyone, we'll see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Good meeting everyone. Look forward to working together.
Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Absolutely. Bye.
Okay, I'm going to shift us back to the slides. Okay. So that's all I have this evening in terms of kind of general information about the project, about the CAC, and then also, kind of having that face-to-face with the development team, learning more about the project that way. We try to kind of regularly bring the development team to these updates, since obviously they have a lot of the kind of direct knowledge. But want to also leave a little time here just about general updates from CAC members. If there's anything else, obviously this is, you coming together with your neighbors, people who live and work around here, to see if anybody had anything they wanted to share with the group. And it is also very fine to have no updates for this meeting. Okay, then the last agenda item I have is just public comment period. And so we generally have this at the end, but as you saw, if anybody ever has a question from the public during one of our more substantive agenda items, I will usually try to pause it there for them to ask that question. And then just as long as people are ideally keeping it to, 2 to 3 minute comments, that's generally the standard for public meetings. So we do have one member of the public still in attendance. I'm just going to give a few seconds if attendee wants to raise their hand to ask any questions. Otherwise, we can just kind of shift towards the end and towards adjournment. Cool. I am not seeing that hand go up. So with that, the last thing I have is adjournment. But again, this is our first meeting. Very appreciative of everyone taking the time. Obviously, for new members also, thank you so much for having interest in being a part of these conversations and bringing your questions, already bringing perspectives of your neighbors and some of the concerns about the project, or just trying to address any fears or unknowns about it. That's exactly what this space is for. So thank you for that. Are there any final questions that people want to ask here? You also all have my email, so if you're thinking about anything after the meetings, you can always reach out. Cool. Not seeing any hands. Well, then I usually try to keep these done by 7, so people can still have some of their evening. So thank you again for this evening. I will let you know when we are planning to host the next meeting. It might be the second Thursday in November. If we have no updates at that time, I might just send an email that says, we don't need to meet at this moment. And in that case, we would just look to meet in December or early in the new year. But I think we'll probably end up meeting again before the end of 2024. But I will look forward to talking to everyone then. Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Have a great night, everyone.